Sella. Look, I said I've been on my creep mode. This shit hella easy, I got cheat codes.
Hey.
How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Blessed and highly favored.
All right. I love that.
Thank you for joining us this week on Wealthy Sis.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. So my name is Josie. I go by Jo. I am the CEO and founder of CannablisJo Consulting. Like I said, I am a cannabis consultant and coach. I am not a physician. I am here to bring awareness and education on cannabis as medicine.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So today we're going to talk about cannabis in the home. Let's start with the do's and the don'ts of cannabis storage.
Yes, so cannabis storage is extremely important. First of all, of course, we're in the state of Florida, so cannabis is only medicinal, it's not recreational, so we have to make sure we mention that first. So when you're a patient in the state of Florida, you're qualified, you have your medical marijuana card, you go to the dispensary of your choice, you purchase your cannabis and your medical cannabis in any form of consumption. There is something called a Lot Green box, Lot Green stash box, which I love. This is something that I use myself. It is a great way to protect yourself as a patient and to make sure that you're storing your medical cannabis in a safe manner. Lot Green stash box, I want to mention, is a Black-owned, 100% Black-owned company. So shout out to them for bringing this to me and showing me how this works and how effective this is. Something that we want to practice as patients in the state of Florida is making sure that when we purchase our medicine from the dispensary, it is stored safely. So the Lot Green stash box, among other companies as well, this is to basically store your medicine. It is smell proof. And it's like double sealed, and it has compartments so that you can place all of your cannabis, all of your medical cannabis, safely and in place. It also has a combination lock, so that way other people are not getting into your medical cannabis. You never want to share your meds or have any children access your meds, so that's why it's important. Also, storage and traveling from the dispensary to your home, when you put everything in that Lot Green stash box or stash box of your choice, you're going to want to put that in the trunk of your car. You never want to drive from the dispensary or anywhere you're going with that medicine up front in the car with you. So that's why the lock box is important, because it is going to be locked. It's going to be smell proof, so your car or where you're at, the odor and the smell is not present. And then storage in the home as well, because I am a mom of 4. I do not want my kids getting into my medical cannabis. I store my flour, my tinctures, all of my supplies. I store it in this box. I have a combination lock for it. That's only something that I can access as a patient, and then that way nobody is consuming my meds and we're keeping it all safe.
So let's talk about keeping it fresh and safeguarding your medicine. What are your top 4 tips?
Wow, okay, so my top 4 tips, and it all depends on what you're consuming as well. If it's like capsules or tinctures, that can be at room temperature. You don't have to refrigerate that. If you have flour, of course, you don't have to refrigerate that either. You want that at room temperature. You don't want to leave it in the garage. You don't want to leave it in your car. The medicine, the oils from like a vape can evaporate. That has happened to multiple people. You want to make sure you don't leave your tinctures in the car as well, or in a garage or in a really hot place. The medicine will start to leak out. And if it's a vape cartridge, it will evaporate from that vape cartridge if it's in a really high temperature environment. So you just want to make sure that things like flour, your vape pens, your tinctures, those are at room temperature. That's something that you can keep in your locked box and store it and keep it safe. But you definitely do not want to leave it in a car or a garage or anywhere where it's going to be really hot. Let's see here. For tip number 2, I would always keep it also on a shelf. You don't want to leave it anywhere where it's easy access to anyone. Again, that's why I stress the lockbox, because everything is in that lockbox. I keep mine high up in my closet. I don't leave it laying around anywhere. That's something that I definitely do not want my children getting into or trying to consume something that they should not. So,
How should you? Okay. How should you store cannabis, the flower, and joints?
For flower and joints, you can keep the flower in its container. There are humidifier, like little packs also. They're kind of round, and you can put that in the flower so that it can keep the flower fresher longer. That's another great tip. Those you can order. Sometimes some of the jars that you purchase at the dispensaries, they come with the little packs to keep the flower and everything fresh.
How long does medical cannabis last?
Everything has an expiration date, so all of the cannabis that you purchase at the dispensary, usually it's like a year of shelf life, but it does have expiration dates on every product. So when you buy the product, the label will say THC levels, terpene profile, and percentages if it has CBD or CBG. And it will also have the expiration date on that, and that's really important. You want to make sure that you're not consuming something that's expired, because it's not going to have that medicinal value to it anymore. Once it's expired, it's not going to affect you the same.
What are your top products for storage?
Top products for storage is mason jars, like if you're going to store flour with the little packs inside to keep the flour fresh. The lock green stash box, you can put all your stuff in there, lock it up and put it away. There's also some refrigerators that you can buy that are really small. They look like the ones that you store like makeup in, if you want to put like your concentrates in there, things like that. But again, the sublingual, the tinctures, capsules, you want to keep that all in room temperature. And you just want to make sure it's sealed, and make sure all the things have the labels on them as well. Always keep your patient labels on there, so that if you're traveling with it in your box, or if it's in your house, it's attached to you. It has your patient ID number. So you always have to make sure, as well with any storing of your medical cannabis, that it has the labels on there as well, that you put those labels on all of your products.
Let's talk about traveling. What are the do's and don'ts of traveling? What should we not do?
So for traveling, again, you want to make sure you use something like the lock green stash box. You put everything in there. It's smell proof. If I'm going to go out of town and travel within the state of Florida, because of course we know that it is not regulated federally. It's not federally regulated, so you don't want to travel on a plane with your products. You don't want to cross state lines. You don't know the rules and regulations of medical cannabis, or if they even allow it in some states. So you just want to make sure you're staying within your state where you are a patient. Like if I'm a patient of the state of Florida, I am to consume within the state. And when I travel and I go out of town or whatever, I make sure everything is in my lock green stash box. I keep it in the trunk as well, and I make sure everything is labeled so that it is linked to me as a patient. But you never want to travel on a plane. You don't want to cross state lines with your medical cannabis. Just because you're a patient of the state of Florida, that does not mean that you can go out of state lines and go on a plane with your medical cannabis. Like I said, it is not federally legal, so it's not something where you can just carry your product everywhere you go. You have to be very careful when you're traveling. You just want to make sure if you're a patient of the state of Florida, again, that you stay within the state and that you are traveling with your meds in the trunk. And if you have it in a stash box, better, because it's smell proof, so that your whole car does not smell like medical cannabis as well. You just want to be safe if you happen to get pulled over, because that is treated like a DUI if you have product with you, or if you're consuming and driving, that's also not allowed. You want to make sure that you are safe and you're not consuming and driving. You want to make sure you're not consuming outside, out in the open in public. we live in a medical state. It's not recreational, so that is not allowed either. Just because you're a patient, you can't just walk around and consume medical cannabis and think it's okay. It is not. You have to consume within the privacy of your own home. And like again, if you're driving, do not consume. That's not something that you should be doing. That is treated like a DUI.
All right, so you're a mother,
Yes.
and I think it's important that we talk about the pros and the cons, and we highlight all aspects of a medical marijuana and cannabis in the home. So what are some of the dangers in the household when we talk about things like weed edibles and kids?
I am so glad that you brought that up because, of course, there are certain items like edibles, like you mentioned, like chocolates and gummies. Those things have to be refrigerated. So you definitely don't want to keep that in the general fridge at home. I have somewhere separate. You can buy like a small little cooler, a small little fridge. They have those little mini ones. You can buy them almost anywhere now. I even seen them at Ross one time. And people usually use that to store makeup, store little things like that. But you can also store your edibles. And I would make sure that it's locked and that it's safe, and also educating your family and your children as well. Not so much that you're hiding it, but you want to keep it safe. But you also want to bring that education and that awareness to your children and let them know this is my medicine, this is not something that you should be consuming ever. You should never touch these things when you see them. Make sure you always have the label on everything. Sometimes edibles can look like regular food, so you want to make sure you keep your labels on everything so that it says on there like beware contains THC or beware, and it tells you the ingredients that it contains. You want to make sure you have all your labels on your product at all times. That way there's no confusion and mixing with anyone else, and that's why it's important to have a small little refrigerator, if it's in your home, in your bedroom, or somewhere where you know your children, if you have children in the home, that they don't have easy access to, because you want to keep them safe. You want to make sure they're not consuming your medicine.
How do you suggest that we approach talking to our kids and other parents about marijuana in the home?
Marijuana in the home, cannabis in the home.
And rephrase that question.
It's extremely important. The education is key. Education is key, and just being open and honest and sharing your experience and why you use cannabis as medicine. Like my kids know my ailments and how I consume safely and why I consume. They have all of that education and knowledge. And I constantly read articles to them. My mom was also a patient as well, so my kids got to see that firsthand. Like, she used to use tinctures, and they saw how she stored it and kept it away from them on the top shelf. So they understood that that was her medicine, and that was not something that it was safe for them to consume. So just education is extremely important, and it's key. Because if you're not honest and you're not sharing the education and the knowledge, they'll be more curious to go ahead and try something because you're telling them that they're not allowed to do it, versus educating them and sharing your why, but also sharing, bringing that awareness and that education is extremely important and key, versus hiding the fact that you're consuming. So that way everybody's aware, everybody knows the pros and cons, everyone knows to be safe, and everyone also knows what could happen, the dangers of consuming and being a minor and not knowing how this can affect your body.
Is there an age that you would say, you know, like, is there a youngest that you would say for educational purposes? Like, should I explain this to my 7-year-old, or should I wait until they're a bit older?
Yeah.
When do you think, you know, is the right time to have that discussion?
That's really a good question, because I have a 7 and a 13-year-old as well. So my children's ages are 21, 13, 10, and 7. They are all aware. They're all aware of where I put my edibles, rules. They know the safety, they know the danger, they know not to consume that. It's education. You have to educate. I don't think that there's any wrong age to do that. I feel like.
Well, this was a great discussion today.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor and a blessing being on your segment about women in cannabis. My name is Jo. I am a cannabis consultant and coach, founder and CEO of CannablisJo Consulting. You can find me on Instagram as CannablisJo, CannablisJo Consulting on Twitter and Facebook. And thank you again for having me. This was great, integrating plant medicine in our daily lives and mindful consumption. Ache.
Till next time.
You too damn loud, let's go. Look, I don't care about your leg, let's go. We gotta get inside the house.
I said I've been on my creep mode. This shit hella easy.